Today, we're going to actually uncover what the term executive presence means, what it means for you, and how you can develop executive presence in a way that feels authentic, in a way that feels natural, in a way that works for you, your lifestyle, your personality, and more importantly, your current company. Let's get right into things. So, first, what is executive presence? Right? It's this major term that's thrown around so often in the leadership space. But what does it really mean? Let's unpack it a little bit deeper. First, I want you to close your eyes for a moment, if you can. If not, just take a moment and really think about when I say the term executive presence, or when I say think of a person that has executive presence. What does that mean? What comes to mind to you? Are you imagining a man in a tailored suit, standing straight? Maybe he's 6'2", who has a firm handshake, who has a booming voice. What comes to mind for you? What qualities stand out when you visualize the idea of someone with executive presence? Now, this is important. Don't skip this step. All of us have a preconceived notion of pretty much everything, including executive presence. And so, before I give you my definition, it's important to understand your definition and where you're coming from. It's important to understand what preconceived notions, what stereotypes, what expectations you have of the term executive presence. Because whatever that is for you, that has so many important clues and insights into where you expect this to go and why you might be feeling resistance around developing executive presence for yourself. Let me give you an example. If you associate executive presence with someone who's 6'2" in a tailored suit with, confidence exuding out of every single pore. If you don't identify as someone who's confident, if you don't identify as someone who's capable of exuding confidence when they walk into a room, there's a massive disconnect, and you won't feel like you are capable of developing executive presence for yourself. So again, take a moment. What does the term executive presence mean to you? What are the qualities that stand out? What aspects of it make someone have executive presence? Perfect. Now, let's think about you for a second. Think about yourself and you as a leader. What terms come up? What qualities come up? What ideas come up for you? If I was to ask you to describe yourself in 5 or 10 adjectives, would you be able to? How many of these adjectives would be in line with your definition of executive presence? This is the perfect place to start, because now that you know what your definition of executive presence is, what expectations you have around it, once you've taken a moment to think about who you are, how you describe yourself, and where you are starting from, well, now you have a much clearer understanding of where the gaps are that you need to bridge. Where are the areas of improvement where you seem to be lacking executive presence that need to be buffed up a little bit more? Now, if you didn't have a moment to do this now, maybe you're driving, maybe you're busy, that's fine. Please come back to this part of the episode and do the exercise, because it will tremendously help you with everything else that we talk about later. And it's perfectly fine to do it after the fact. Re-listen if you need to, because it will give you so many incredible insights about yourself and your leadership style. Okay. Now, let's get into how you can actually bridge the gap for yourself between what your current leadership style is and where you really want to be with your executive presence. Now, let's unpack executive presence, shall we? For me, I've unpacked executive presence into 4 key pillars that I see. 4 key pillars that will resonate with you. And if it helps, think of it as the PCRA. The PCRA, the presence, the communication skills, the relational leadership ability, and the appearance. Now, let's go deeper, starting with your presence. When we think of executive presence, what do we think of? Right? Somebody who's able to take up space in a room, someone who's able to command a room simply by being in it. It's how they carry themselves. It's how they sit. It's how they position themselves. It's when they choose to talk, when they choose to listen. Are they able to maintain their authority even while they're listening? Are they able to speak in a cool, calm, and collected tone, even if it's a high pressure situation, or even if the person speaking to them is perhaps being disrespectful, is perhaps being aggressive, is perhaps worked up themselves? How are they energetically and physically within the room? What is their presence like? Someone with executive presence, when they walk into a room, you know they're there. Someone without executive presence, they may be in the front and center of the room and might just be easy to overlook, right? We'll come back to this in a moment. The second pillar is really the communication skills, the ability to communicate. So the first part of your communication skills, the verbal, it's how you speak, how you articulate yourself, your vocal mechanics. Are you someone who is able to speak with a good tone, speak at a good pace, have a good volume that is appropriate for the situation? Someone with executive presence, are they using a ton of filler words? Are they hesitating? Or, as I like to call it, are they confidently unconfident? Which means if there's a moment when you don't know something, if there's a moment when something comes up and they don't have an answer, can they be confident in the fact that they don't know this thing? Now, let me unpack that a little bit more. This is a topic that trips up so many of the clients that I work with because it takes a moment to wrap your head around it. The self-imposed pressure that comes up when you don't know something, the nerves and anxiety that comes up when there's an answer or there's a question and you don't have an answer for it, that can be very stressful for a lot of people. But someone who has developed this executive presence, really, they're able to maintain their composure, they're able to maintain their certainty, and they're able to answer in a way that is still cool, calm, composed, and adequate to say that they don't have the answer, but that they will find the answer. They will get the answer. They will work on obtaining the answer. Let me give you an example. If you're in a meeting and you are asked about specific data related to the project that you're overseeing, and maybe you don't have the latest statistics on it, maybe you don't have the latest numbers, maybe you just are out of the loop and you didn't know that you were supposed to be overseeing this project. It happens. It's okay. No judgment. Someone with executive presence will be able to answer that question in a way that looks something like, you know what? I don't actually have those numbers off the top of my head, but I'll be sure to look them up and get back to you within an hour. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's the confidence that comes with being confidently uncertain. Someone without executive presence, on the other hand, might get flustered. They might start to use way too many filler words. They might visibly get nervous, maybe even start to sweat or fidget. And that may look something like, I don't really know. I wasn't sure. I don't have this prepared. I'll try and look up. And do you see the difference? Even when you are uncertain, executive presence, the confidence lets you be confidently uncertain. You'll get back to them. You'll look into it. You'll find the answer, and you're certain that you will. Now, the other aspect of your communication skills is beyond vocal mechanics. So part of that is learning to listen. It's the ability to actually maintain a conversation, to hold space for other people, to give them room to expand on their answers. So don't interrupt while they're thinking. Give them a moment to add any additional information. Asking open-ended questions. Now, this is an interesting one because open-ended questions are often uncomfortable for a lot of leaders. It feels uncomfortable to ask an open-ended question because, number one, they're not sure what response they're going to get. And number two, there's often a misconception that asking an open-ended question will be uncomfortable for the team member, or that it will make them seem like they don't know, or that they're incompetent. And so many of the leaders I work with stick to yes or no questions, but these aren't as ideal as open-ended questions. They're not as effective. They're not as useful. They definitely have a time and a place. But in the grand scheme of things, If you want executive presence, you need to be able to hold space and ask open ended questions, even if it's for the simple reason of gaining more insight into what your team member is thinking. And even if it's just holding the space for them to express their opinion, explain how they did something, describe their process so that they feel seen and heard and validated as well. So, communication, part of it is your vocal mechanics, the practical aspect of how you speak. Part of it is the ability to listen and to hold space for others without interrupting, making assumptions, or feeling uncomfortable asking questions. And part of it is the practical aspect, the nuance of how you communicate. What words are you using? How are you putting your sentences together? Are you speaking in a way that is clear and easy for other people to follow? Are you rambling, right? Do you see the differences? Someone with executive presence, someone who has developed the confidence and the communication skills, they're not spending 7 minutes talking confidently in a circle, rambling around the points while everyone else loses interest. Sure, you may sound confident rambling, but that detracts from the overall quality of your conversation. So let me give you an example. If I was to ramble about the importance of communication skills and talk in a circle, but I wasn't using filler words, but I was still talking about the same thing over and over, making my point, maybe I could do it a little bit more firmly or aggressively. And I kept telling you that communication skills are important. And I just wasn't getting to the end of my point if I just kept going. And I could do it certainly. And I'm not using filler words. And do you get the point? Just because you're able to speak well does not mean it's the same thing as actually articulating your thoughts well. So, someone with executive presence, they understand how to put their sentences together, how to express their ideas clearly, how to articulate the things that they want to say in a way that makes sense and leaves room for follow up questions, leaves room for more information as needed, but they don't speak the entire time. They don't ramble. They know how to make their point and end it there. The third pillar is the relational leadership ability. So, this is really the way that someone with executive presence leads others, the way that they connect with others, the way that they build rapport and manage their team. So, someone with executive presence, they're able to inspire others. They're able to build that rapport. They're able to have trust within the team members and then with each team member. You see, it's one thing to have a one-on-one conversations with your team members and build a sense of rapport and trust and loyalty with them. But it's a whole other ballgame when you can instill that sense of camaraderie, of teamwork, of trust within the team itself. And that's a really important part. Because if each team member only trusts you and they don't work together, that has a host of implications and consequences. But when you're able to talk to them, when you're able to inspire them, when you're able to take time to ensure that everything is symbiotic and working together, and if there's conflict, you address it, you give them opportunities to work together, to collaborate, you take the time to instill team values. You take the time to instill team expectations and you set them and you manage them and you follow up with them. Well, that adds to a cohesive team. If a leader, if someone lacking executive presence is not doing these things, that's when you start to see a team fall apart. That's when you start to see disconnect, miscommunication, team members starting to have conflict rather than learning to figure it out. And if you're not empowering your team to at least try handling things on their own first, if you're not teaching them and coaching them and taking the time to mentor them, then it's no surprise when things start to fall apart. Sometimes when everyone is busy, when there's a lot going on, it's easy to overlook the relational aspect. It's easy to fall into the mindset of they're adults, they're experts, they know what they're doing, that's their job, and to just leave them and close your eyes and hope and pray and fingers crossed that they figure it out. But if you are not setting a norm, if you are not setting certain expectations and enforcing them, if you're not having those uncomfortable conversations, if you are not teaching people how to shift some of their own behaviors and their own approaches, if you're not creating that safe space, that psychological safety that your team needs, they will not flourish. Maybe they will on their own for a little bit, but eventually the conflict will come through. So, part of that is knowing how to lead, how to coach, how to mentor, how to hold space from others. And part of that is really the team dynamics of understanding how does your team work? What is the motivation of each of your team members? What is their preferred communication style naturally? You see, there's often a misconception I see with the leaders I work with that whatever approach they are used to, whatever their natural tendency is, that's what they expect of others. But in reality, that's not how it works. You see, we're all different. If we were to go back to the basics, we all have different learning styles. Some people are very visual, some people are very auditory, some people are very kinesthetic, some people are a mix. So some people need to see something in order to understand it. Some people need to hear it. Maybe they need to hear an explanation or a breakdown or a step by step to be able to process it and integrate that information. Some people need to do it themselves. It's not enough to see it and try the step by step themselves to be able to understand how it works. Some people need a mix of all, and that's fine. Once you understand that, once you begin to use that to your advantage, your team begins to function better and you become better as a leader. If you are someone who is goal oriented, if you're someone who's action oriented, if you are just here to get results, it's important to understand that your team is also there to get results, but they may not do it in the same approach that you do. And there's an important aspect of understanding that adds to your executive presence, because it adds to your ability to have these relational leadership opportunities, to be able to give feedback in a way that is effective, in a way that your team member can understand and implement. If your team member is working on a project and you give them feedback based on the way you want to receive feedback, not on the way they need the feedback, well, then it's no surprise if they're not integrating the feedback effectively. So it's about how you talk to your team. It's about the relationships that you build within your team members. It's about the expectations and the values that you set. It's about how you talk to your team, how you deliver information and feedback. It's about how you balance being an authority with being an approachable leader. And so it's important to understand that someone with executive presence has a balance of both. Maybe they have an open door policy, but they still set firm expectations, right? There's someone that you can talk to and you can approach with your problems, but they've made it very clear when you're supposed to try that problem first, what steps you're supposed to take to try and resolve it on your own, and when and how is an appropriate time to reach out for support. It's not just a free for all. It's not just a rotating door. It's not just, I don't want to know what's going on. I told you what to do and go do it. But it's a balanced approach of both. And so the last pillar of executive presence is really the appearance. And now appearance, I'm going to break this down a little bit further. Number one, it's the appearance of what we think of when we say first impressions, the visual appearance. How are you dressed? How are you put together? What do you look like, right? Without getting into any of the stereotypes or the biases, but it's how are you visually representing yourself? If you are working in a corporate space, are you coming dressed appropriately for your position? Now, I know company culture may play a role. Some places are a little bit more casual, some places are a little bit more formal, but it's important to understand this. We all are visual creatures. We all see things, and we all have incredibly fast impressions of someone based on how they look, based on our assumptions of what we think they are like, based on how they look, based on our own history of what someone who looks like that we've interacted with in the past has been like, has done, has talked like, has achieved, etc. That's why it's so unconventional to have a big boss show up in board shorts and flip flops because it's not really done. It's not what we associate with it. That's why, if I, back at the beginning, when I asked you, what do you think of when you think of executive presence? I asked you if you think of someone in a tailored suit, because these are the things that we associate with an executive presence, a top dog in the organization. And although I agree that this shouldn't matter, I'm also here to tell you that it does matter. So back in graduate school, back when I was obtaining my doctorate and doing a ton of research on stereotypes and biases, the one thing that always stood out is this. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter how unbiased you think you are. At the end of the day, everyone has unconscious stereotypes. Everyone has unconscious biases. Everyone has conscious biases as well. So these are biases that we're either not aware of or that we are aware of, that we know we are biased in this way. Everyone has them, and they are activated almost immediately, within milliseconds. We used to do experiments where we would present people with pictures and category labels. And so they would look at a picture and they would have to match it with a category label. And what we would often do is we would show pictures and categories that matched. So you can think of something like a smiley face and the category happy, and a frowny face and the category sad. And then we would flip the categories so that they were not matched and ask people to rate the pictures. And every single time, it was so much harder for people to categorize and rate the pictures when they did not match the category, because we all have expectations, stereotypes, and biases that get activated. And it just is. Okay, we'll leave it there for now. The point being, as much as you may think, as much as you may wish, as much as you may discount your appearance and say it doesn't really matter, they should be looking at the quality of my work. It's the way that my team gets results that should matter. If my shirt is pressed or if I'm wearing a t-shirt, none of this matters. I'm sorry, my friend, but I have to disagree with you in my professional opinion. It matters. It matters, and people make impressions of you based on how you look. That's why things like pretty privilege exist. There's research to show that people who look better, quote unquote better, people who are more good looking, people who are more put together, people who are, quote unquote prettier, more handsome, more put together, they experience benefits compared to people who don't. And that may look like people are nicer to them. That may look like they get paid more. That may look like a whole variety of things depending on what you're looking at. But the bottom line is, people who are put together, people who look better, get benefits from it. When it comes to your executive presence, as much as you may wish that you could deny appearance matters, it does. And so someone with executive presence, they're likely very put together. Maybe it's taking an extra 5 minutes to do your hair, to pick out a better fitted outfit, right? Maybe it's not wearing an oversized blazer or a dress shirt that no longer fits, or something that's super outdated fashion-wise. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe, but just take a moment and think about if you had two people in front of you, both of whom were perhaps executives or C-suite positions, and one was clearly put together and the other was disheveled. You would get a different impression off of their capabilities based simply on how they look. It's just the way it is, okay? Now, part of your appearance and part of your expression, and this ties back to presence a little bit, is the way that you carry yourself through your body language and your facial expressions. It's the way that you look physically. So facial expressions, let's start there. Many people don't actually know what their face looks like. I know, it's wild. Many people don't actually realize what their face looks like while they're speaking, and most importantly, while they're listening. You see, we are so used to looking at other people that we forget the entire time those people are looking at us. And so they see your facial expressions. And that's why when you think of someone with executive presence, they seem composed, they seem calm, they seem like they've got a really good poker face figured out because they're able to maintain the calm and maintain their emotions without wearing their heart on the sleeve, without showing everything that they're thinking, without scowling when they disagree, right? Your facial expressions matter because it's what other people see. And people are really good, even if they don't think they're good. People, let me back up for a second. Your facial expressions matter because other people are looking at it and getting bits of information, bits of insight. They're making judgments about what they think you are thinking based on what your face looks like. So if someone's talking to you and you don't like it, you don't like what they're saying, you disagree, and you're scowling and you're grimacing, they're going to make an assumption of what you're thinking based on how your face changed. So facial expressions are an important part of building this executive presence. Now, going a little further, it's your body language. It's your posture. It's the way that you carry yourself. It's the way that you're able to maintain eye contact or not. Whether you're able to hold a smile, nod, give cues of listening or participation or confidence or not. So when you think of someone with executive presence, it's someone who has understood, implemented, and figured out how to have strong, confident body language. They're not sitting there slouching in their chair. They're not sitting there to one side because they're bored or uncomfortable. They're not fidgeting with their paper, their pens, their notebooks because they're bored or anxious. They've learned how to implement good posture. They've learned how to implement eye contact, nodding, cues of involvement, all these little micro expressions that your body and your facial expression gives off, body language, they've learned how to use it to their advantage. Because again, we're so used to seeing other people that we forget other people are looking at us. And so body language, facial expressions, and how you look visually, super important part of executive presence. So now that we've unpacked what executive presence is and the four pillars: presence, communication skills, relational leadership, and appearance, let's take a moment and reground and reevaluate for a moment. What ideas have been sparked in you? What areas have been triggered that you're like, oh, okay, I see now I've been missing that? What things surprised you? Where are you starting to see more of the gaps between executive presence and where you are now? And there's no judgment here. This is just information. Because when you're working on building your executive presence, you cannot bury your head in the sand. You won't just wake up one day as someone with executive presence if you don't put in the work and take the steps to get there. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes intentional practice. And it takes intentional self-reflection to understand where you are, how you're doing, and where you're going. It's the same thing as using a GPS. You need to understand what your starting point is, what aspects of executive presence you have, and what do you currently lack. Then you need to know what your destination is. What combination of executive presence do you aspire for yourself that suits your personality and your company culture? And then you need to know how to get there and if you've made a wrong turn somewhere. Be your own GPS in building executive presence. And if you need help with that, reach out. This is my bread and butter. I'm happy to coach you on this as well. All right. So now that you have an idea of where you'd like to be and where you're starting from, let me give you an important point to keep in mind based on psychology. Okay. All of us have different personalities. All of us have different learning styles, all of us have different objectives. And here's the catch: do not let your definition of your personality restrict you from improving and stepping outside of your comfort zone. For example, if you think of executive presence, if you know that executive presence requires confidence, but you've always thought of yourself as an introvert, as shy, as someone who's reserved, as someone who doesn't have confidence, do not use the definition of this is just my personality as an excuse to not change. Okay? Whatever you think your personality is, whatever you know your personality traits are, please keep in mind that it is malleable and it is a spectrum. And just because you may say, I'm an introvert and this is my level of confidence, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm only between a 3 and a 5. Okay, but that is your starting point. It doesn't mean that you are destined to stay with the confidence level of 3 to 5 forever and ever and ever more. You are capable of change, and you are capable of either expanding that to a 3 to a 7, or you're capable of sliding it and changing it. So now instead of 3 to 5, it's maybe 4 to 7 or 5 to 8. You are capable of change, but do not let yourself use the excuse of this is just who I am and this is just my personality to prevent yourself from starting to change. Cool. Now, let's get into some practical tips and strategies for how you can start to build your executive presence based on your personality, based on your preferences, based on what resonates with you most right now. So I'm going to preface this by saying, take note of all the strategies I'm going to talk about, but then pick one to start with. So this is why that exercise at the beginning was so important. Once you know what your gaps are, once you know what areas you need to improve on to develop your own executive presence, here's what I want you to do. Either pick the one that resonates with you the most, or pick the one that you know you have the biggest gap in, but just pick one to start that you can actually commit to changing. If you find yourself tempted to do it all, to try and tackle all 4 pillars at once, I get that. I get you. I understand, but it won't be nearly as effective, and you likely quit way before you get results. Trying to do all the things all at once is just overwhelming, and it's too much for your brain. Because now, as you're having a conversation with your team, as you're thinking about all the different aspects of work that you already think about, now on top of that, you have to think about your body language, your presence, your posture, your facial expressions, the confidence, your tone, your volume, it's too much, and it won't work. And you don't want to feel like a deer in the headlights, stuck and frozen, or worse off than before you started. So pick one. Pick one and work on it consistently enough until it starts to feel natural. That may look like a few days, that may look like a few weeks. It depends on the level of resistance and the level of work you put into it. But pick one, work on it until it starts to become a habit. And then, and only then, do you add a second and do the same thing, and then add a third, do the same thing, etc. And again, this is something you need help with, reach out. We can talk about your coaching options. So let's get into the practical strategies for how to build executive presence with the 4 pillars of presence, communication skills, your relational leadership ability, and your appearance. Again, recap, your presence is your ability to hold space. It's your ability to command a room. It's the way that you carry yourself in whatever space you're in. So if you're someone who's experiencing anxiety, nerves, stress, if the thought of going into a meeting is stressful for you and you start to feel like you get adrenaline, cortisol spike, you get the shakes, practice grounding yourself before. And this doesn't have to be a major thing. You don't need like a 15-minute meditation barefoot outside. You can take a quick 2 minutes to do some deep breaths and to just hold space for your body. Box breathing can be very effective. And so box breathing is the concept of breathe in, let's say for You can do a count of 3, 4, or 5, depending on what you can tolerate, which will depend on your stress levels and your sort of physical abilities. So let's say we do a count of 3. So you breathe in for a count of 3, you hold it for a count of 3, you breathe out for a count of 3, you hold it for a count of 3. And then you do it again. You breathe in for a count of 3, hold it for a count of 3, breathe out for a count of 3, hold it. Box breathing can be very effective because it's so simple. You can do it sitting down, standing up, prepping for a meeting. You could do it on camera on a Zoom meeting, and pretty much no one will know what you're doing because it just looks like you're breathing normally. But it's a very great way to start regulating your nervous system and calming down so that the additional anxiety is not impairing your performance. If box breathing is not resonating with you, then do deep breathing where you breathe in, let's say for a count of 3, and then you breathe out for a count that's longer. So you might breathe in for 3, breathe out for 5. Breathe in for 3, breathe out for 5. And this activates, I believe it's your parasympathetic nervous system, essentially just calms you down. And it's great. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you're dealing with some jitters, some anxiety, you want to start building your presence, deep breaths and ground yourself before entering a room or starting a meeting. Now, the second thing is to try practicing on or try on different executive presence in terms of energy. So, like I asked you, when you think of executive presence, what comes to mind? Is it someone who's calm and composed? Is it someone who's got, big energy? Someone who walks slow? Someone who stands tall? Someone who's just calm and composed? What energy, what descriptions come up for you? And just like you get dressed in the morning, just like you can try on different layers, different clothes, try on these different adjectives as qualities for yourself. So can you practice being calm and holding that calm, energetic space? Can you practice maybe moving a little bit more slowly and intentional? If you're someone who tends to be rushed, especially if you tend to have that little bit of anxiety and stress, can you be intentional and slow down? Take a moment to think about your thoughts before you speak. Take a moment to ask that question, that open-ended question. Pause when they're done answering. Can you be intentional about how you do the things that you have to do anyway, right? So try on these different energetic adjectives, see which ones resonate with you. And here's the catch. Just because something is hard doesn't mean you're not capable of doing it. So something to keep in mind is whatever things you see in other people that are either like, ooh, I want that, or, oh, I wish I could do that, or, and you feel that like pang of jealousy that they're doing it and you can't. Those are the things that you actually want for yourself. And just because it's hard, just because you're not used to doing it, doesn't mean you're not capable of doing it down the line. It just means there's some resistance in the way that needs to be worked through first. Okay? And your last thing, at the end of every day, either every work day, every meeting, pick a strategy that works for you, but start reflecting. How was my presence? Did I lose my cool when so-and-so said this? Did I get frustrated when this team member didn't do the thing that they were supposed to do that we already talked about doing 10, 15 times and it was in that SOP and they still didn't do it? Oh, look, I lost my cool again, right? Start to reflect on your ability to hold that presence and nothing else, okay? So those are the 3 strategies to try for presence. Now, let's move on to your communication skills. Number 1, take an accurate assessment, take an honest assessment of your vocal mechanics, of your ability to speak. So record yourself, and this can either be an audio recording or a video recording, and either give it to people, maybe 2-3 people that you trust, and take an assessment yourself. You can also put it through maybe like a ChatGPT or an AI and ask for feedback, including if you get a transcript so that it can go through. And what you really want to do is you want to look at the way that you communicate, practically speaking. So are you using filler words? If you are, What kind of filler words are you using? And most importantly, when are you using them? Are you using them all the time in between every second, third word? Are you using them to hold the space and fill the air while you're thinking and your wheels are turning? Or are you using them in moments of transition when you're ending one sentence or ending one train of thought and starting the next one? When you can identify the types of filler words that you're using and when you're using them, that's when you have a lot more information about how to actually start changing them. Because filler words, it's not as simple as just ums and ahs all the time. There's other types of filler words you can be using, right? So, like, does that make sense? These are all different kinds of filler words that get thrown in, but it's also important to understand when they're happening because those are the moments where you feel some discomfort or uncertainty or you're just filling up space. And that's when you can start to work on changing them. Okay. Look for filler words, look for volume. Are you speaking loud enough for people to hear you? And are you speaking loud enough to sound confident? So here's a hint. If you are someone who tends to have experiences of someone leaning in or saying, "What was that? Can you repeat that?" Huh? Your volume's not there. You need to up your volume a little bit more. If on the other end of the spectrum, you tend to have experiences of someone being like leaning back, wide eyed, or just saying, "Ooh," any sort of cues that you're too loud, then you might have a volume problem where you are yelling at people and they may be perceiving you as yelling. And that can harm your reputation as well because no one wants to be yelled at. Okay. So look for filler words, look for your volume, look for your pace. Listen to the way that you speak. Are you speaking really, really fast so that no one understands what you're saying and your pace is off the charts because you're just anxious? Or are you speaking so slow and maybe like extending your filler words like so slow that people fall asleep and lose interest and maybe they interrupt you all the time? That's a good cue to know. If you are getting bored of yourself, other people get bored of you too. So, filler words, volume, pace, and then pay attention to your tone because tone is a sneaky one. Tone is often confused with volume, and it's not the same thing. Tone is your emotion. If you were to speak to someone and maybe they had a blindfold on, or maybe they were in the other room, it's the sense of your emotion, of your feelings, of the mood that you're in that they would get. Let me give you an example. Think back to when you were a child and your mom or dad came home and they yelled your name. You could tell if they were excited to see you, if they were frustrated, if they were mad at you and you were about to get in trouble. How? How could you tell? Because it's the way that they said your name, the tone that they said it with. And so unintentionally, you may be using a tone that you think you're trying to be friendly, maybe, but it might come off as uncertain or lacking confidence. You might try to be calm, and instead, it might be monotone and bored. You might try to be firm, and instead, it might be way too authoritative and strict. So pay attention to your tone as well. And just take note. What do you actually sound like? Not what you think you sound like in your head, because that's different. What do you actually sound like? What do people hear when you speak? That's a very important place to start with your communication skills. Now, next exercise. If you're like, my communication skills are fine, well, assess how confident you sound when you speak, especially in those moments where you need that confidence uncertainty. Practice. Record yourself answering questions. If you can, record yourself speaking in a meeting or a team meeting or a call and listen back to how you actually sound like. Are you ending your sentences like this all the time, like you're asking a question with an inflection going up that makes you sound uncertain? Are you using a lot of phrases like, I think so, I'm not sure, I think, those kinds of things, right? You might not even realize that you're doing it, but when the uncertainty creeps up, so do those phrases. So take an accurate assessment of beyond the vocal mechanics. What are you actually sounding like when you speak? Can you give an answer like, I don't have an answer for that, in a way that is clear and confident without buffering and going all over the place. And the third thing that you can do to start assessing your communication skills is your ability to pause and to gather your thoughts and then articulate them clearly. So, pauses are very useful. They're a great way to start eliminating filler words, but it's also a sign of confidence when you can take a moment to gather your thoughts and then answer rather than having that pressure. And often it's self imposed pressure to just answer right away with the first thing that comes to mind. And then you're going down this way, thinking about how you should have gone down this way. And then you're rambling, and then you're pivoting, and then you're trying to speak. And it just detracts from that confident executive presence authority that you're going for. Okay? So that's your communication skills. We'll end it there for now. Let's move on to strategies for being a better relational leader and improving your relational leadership ability. How often are you asking open ended questions? How often are you asking an open ended question followed up by another question? How comfortable are you asking questions in general? Do you feel like it's uncomfortable asking questions to your team? Start there. Asking questions is a very powerful way to lead because, number one, it gives that safe space for them to answer. Caveat there being that you create that safe space in the way that you receive the information. So you're not giving signs of judgment through your facial expressions, your body language, maybe any sounds like right? Keep that there. How often are you asking questions? Just be honest. Start there. The more that you're able to ask questions, the more information you will get about your team, what they're thinking, what their motivations are, why they did things a specific way, and any gaps in their knowledge or their understanding that you can then address. If a team member is doing something wrong and you just make assumptions and give them tasks and throw things at them, you are missing a core component of why they did it wrong in the first place. It's easy to assume that this thing happened. Well, maybe it was something else. Maybe they actually lack the skills or the support. Maybe something else came up that they needed support with that they didn't know how to ask for help with. Maybe they are genuinely untrained or uneducated on this aspect and you need to supplement that, right? There's so many things that could be going on. And unless you take the time to ask some open-ended questions and get their perspective and motivation on things, you're just missing out on a huge part of the team and the team dynamics and being that relational leader. So, how often are you asking questions? Start there. Strategy 2, pay attention to when you listen. And pay attention to how often, number one, you interrupt, and how often, number two, you assume you know what they're going to say. You assume you know where the conversation is going and what they're going to say next. And if you're interrupting, if you're finishing their sentences, if you're making assumptions, again, you are missing out on a crucial amount of information. Yes, there will be times when you know what they're going to say. Yes, there will be times when you know where the conversation is going. But making that assumption every single time is detrimental to you and your leadership ability and your executive presence. So start by having an accurate assessment of your ability to listen. How good of a listener are you? Ask 2 to 3 people for feedback. Your friends, your family, and I know it'll be a little bit biased because they see you in a slightly different context, but get an assessment from others because you might think that your listening skills are like 5 stars. And you might get the feedback that your listening skills are actually 3 stars. And so there's a disconnect between what you even think you're doing and what you're actually doing in practice. Okay? So to recap, how are you with asking questions? How are you with listening? And then lastly, how often are you able to give people recognition? How often are you giving them, quote unquote, praise or compliments and really taking time to acknowledge the things that they're doing well rather than always pointing out flaws or setbacks or things that they did wrong or more and more and more and more and more to-dos. Okay? If it's been a while since you gave your team a compliment, make it a point to do so at least once a week to start. And when I say compliments, it's not about appearance. It's not about things. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's what's one thing that they did well that you can recognize. It doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe they handled a customer inquiry really well. Maybe they did something on time and, ooh, we're just going to celebrate that. Maybe they worked together really efficiently and got a project done ahead of the deadline that was passed on to another team, and you guys look great. It doesn't have to be complicated. But giving compliments and giving recognition for things that are going well is an extremely important part of the process because it also helps the team stay motivated and it helps them feel recognized and that you're a balanced leader who's able to recognize the wins and not just someone who nags them about all the things that they're not doing well. Okay? And finally, the appearance, the body language, the facial expressions, the way that you look. So, number one, starting with practical appearance strategies. What do you actually look like right now? What do you wear to work? Is your shirt perhaps in need of ironing? Maybe it doesn't quite fit. Maybe you are wearing clothes from 15 years ago that no longer fit you. What's one small thing you can do to upgrade your appearance this week in a way that still feels good, in a way that feels natural, in a way that just feels a little bit more upgraded towards that version of executive presence you're aiming for? Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe you have a really nice watch at home that you haven't been wearing. If you are someone who's doing a lot of Zoom meetings, are you currently wearing a ton of crew neck t-shirts? Can you maybe one up it to a polo or a dress shirt? It doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be upgraded to be in line with the type of executive presence, atmosphere for yourself you want to have. Go back to your image of what you thought of when I asked you about executive presence. That's what you think of, if that's what you associate with it. What's the one thing you can do to be more in line with that? Okay? Now, second thing, do an audit of your facial expressions. Okay? Facial expressions, again, so important. And most people don't really know what they look like. So here's a fun way to actually assess what you look like depending on where you are. If you work from home, set up your phone or turn on your camera while you work and record yourself naturally and watch it back and take a look at the types of facial expressions and body language and posture that you have. You might be surprised at what you find. If you work in the office, if you have a chance, set up your phone, same thing, take a video, take some pictures naturally while you work. The key is natural, not posed. Set it up, leave it for like 45 minutes while you work, and then watch it back and see the types of changes that come up. If you can, if maybe you live with someone, if you have a roommate, family, maybe a colleague in the office that you trust, get them to take spontaneous pictures of you while working without you knowing that they're going to. Because that's when you will get an accurate representation of what you really look like in your natural state. Maybe you slouch over your computer and maybe you scowl a lot. Maybe you sit very lopsided and just look off. And that's okay, because again, this is all important information to start with so that you know what your baseline is, what you're aiming for, and how to get there. Okay? And so audit your facial expressions and then audit your body language, of course. One way to do this is the exact same thing. Record yourself naturally, see what you look like. Another way is to just having micro moment check-ins with yourself. So when you're in a meeting, when you are talking to someone, if you're on a call, take a moment to just quickly check in. And it doesn't have to be complicated, it's just posture. So literally how you are sitting, legs and arms. Okay, start with those three things. Are you sitting straight? Are you slouching? Are you lopsided or are you upright? Quick check-in. Your legs, are you crisscross applesauce? Are you pointing towards the door, pointing away from the person you're talking to? Or can you have your feet planted firmly, sitting up in a way that's still comfortable for you? And your arms, are you crossed, closed off, leaning away? Are you open? Are you waving your arms like a maniac while you talk? Or are you hiding your arms and no one knows what you're really thinking or feeling? So just do an assessment. Again, it's all information to start with. And so at the start of a meeting, you can check in and say, okay, how do I look right now? Meeting starting. Let me do some stretches. Let me ground my feet. Maybe I'm going to sit like this. Maybe I'm going to sit like this. Maybe I'm going to sit like this. I'm going to find a position that's comfortable and natural for me and do that check in. The meeting's going to start. You're going to do whatever it is that you need to do. You're going to think, you're going to talk, you're going to whatever, and you're going to change. Your posture will change. And so 15 minutes into the meeting, you might have a quick thought of, okay, posture check in, body language check in. I started with good posture, but now I'm slouching and I'm bored and I'm looking at the door and looking at the clock. All right, let me reset. And that's it. And by doing those simple check ins with yourself over and over and over again, you are going to train yourself to have that executive presence, the posture, the facial expressions that you want. But it takes those intentional check ins and those intentional changes. Okay? Awesome. You got this. So, to wrap everything up, what is your definition of executive presence? Where are you currently on the scale of executive presence? How is your presence? How are your communication skills? How is your relational leadership ability? And what is your appearance like? Pick the one that resonates with you the most. Pick the one that feels the easiest, the most motivated to start. Start with one. But the important thing is that you start. No one is going to build executive presence for you, but people will judge you on it. And so, if you want to have executive presence that feels natural and authentic, these are the different pieces that you need to start playing around with to build a style that feels calm and confident and natural and is still in line with the type of executive presence that other people associate it with. Because, like I said, you might want to come to work wearing board shorts and flip flops, feeling like you're on top of the world and you're running your company. But until you get to a place where you are able to do that confidently and have your company flourish, other people will not match that impression. And so it's a delicate balance, like a Rubik's Cube, between finding the pieces that work for you, that line up with what the idea and the definition of executive presence is, especially if you're a leader that is looking for a promotion, that is looking for opportunities, that is looking to make their way up to the C-suite roles. You want to be recognized for the right things. Okay? So pick the one, start there, go back, re-listen if you need to, because there's a lot of strategies in here that you can start with. Now, as a bonus resource, I have created a worksheet specifically for this episode that will help you go through this process and identify the areas of your executive presence, what you want to start with, what strategies, what techniques are applicable to you. It's a roadmap of sorts that you can use to create for yourself and to hold yourself a little bit more accountable. If that is something that you would like, if it's a resource that's interesting to you, please go ahead, check it out. I will link it in the description as well, or you can go to christina80.com/worksheet and it'll be there for you. If this is something that you know you need some help and support with, reach out to me. Let's talk about your coaching options. This is something that I do that is tailored specifically to each and every client that I work with based on your needs and your starting point. You can think of me as your GPS. I help you figure out where the heck you are starting from, where it is that you want to go, and what's the path of least resistance to get there for you. It's optimized with behavioral science, with psychology, and honestly with techniques that work. So remember, you've got this. The important thing is that you start and that you stay honest with yourself. Because no matter how much you want this, if you're feeling resistance and you're not doing the work, your executive presence will not change. So pick the one thing that you're starting with and try it out. Try it out for a week. Try it out for 2 weeks. Try it out for a month. See what happens. Notice the changes you experience in yourself. And more importantly, notice the changes that you experience in your team and in others and how they react to you. Because something as simple as changing your facial expressions and body language might seem so minor that it's easy to overlook because we all have so many important things that we need to do. But once you do, I promise you, the way that people talk to you, the way that people interact with you, the way that people react to you will change simply because you look different and you hold space different. It's worth taking the time to invest into. Now, if anything stood out, If you've had any major breakthroughs, I'd love to hear about them. Feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, and I can't wait to hear about your breakthroughs and the type of amazing leader with authentic executive presence that you are developing for yourself. I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care. Bye.